Const script text sears checking. Your computer is about to install an update that Microsoft is calling routine, a standard Patch Tuesday release, the kind of thing that happens every month and that most people click through without thinking twice. But this one is different, and if you let it run without understanding what is actually inside it, you could end up staring at a black screen with no way to get back in, or watching your internet connection slow to a crawl for no obvious reason, or spending hours trying to figure out why Windows keeps downloading something, failing to install it, and starting the whole process over again on a loop. And here's the part that makes this genuinely worth your attention right now. Microsoft's own health dashboard, as of this recording, shows no known issues. The official release notes do not mention any of this, but the Reddit threads are growing. The community forums are filling up. The Microsoft Q&A boards are collecting reports from users describing the same set of problems on the same update, all in real time. So let us talk about what is actually in this update, what it is doing that nobody in the official channels is talking about, who specifically needs to be concerned, what you should check on your machine before you let any of this install, and if you are already dealing with the aftermath, how to get yourself back to a working computer. Here is what Microsoft shipped on May 13th, 2026. For Windows 11 users on versions 24H2 and 25H2, the update is KB 5089549. If you're still on the older Windows 11 version 23H2, the update you will receive is KB 5087420. And for Windows 10 users who are enrolled in extended security updates, the relevant package is KB 5087544. These are mandatory security updates. Windows will download and attempt to install them automatically, unless you have specifically gone out of your way to pause or block updates. On the surface, the numbers behind this release are significant enough to take seriously. Microsoft patched 120 security vulnerabilities in a single release. 17 of those are rated critical. 14 of the critical flaws involve remote code execution, which means attackers could run their own malicious code on your machine just by getting you to visit a specially crafted website, open a rigged document, or connect to a compromised network. One of the vulnerabilities in this release in the Windows DNS client is particularly worth understanding. A malicious DNS server can send your Windows machine a specially formatted response that corrupts memory and allows remote code execution at the network level without you clicking anything. You do not have to download a file. You do not have to open an attachment. Just being connected to a network with a bad actor on it can be enough. By the pure security numbers, this is a release that matters. The problem is the way Microsoft packaged and deployed it, because for a meaningful number of users, the update itself is creating disruptions that are as bad as the vulnerabilities it was designed to patch. The first thing you need to know about is the install failure loop. Since KB 5089549 started rolling out to Windows 11 devices, a growing number of users are reporting the same experience. The update downloads, it begins installing. It gets somewhere between 35 and 36% complete, and then it stops, fails, and begins rolling itself back. Windows shows the message that something did not go as planned and that it is undoing changes, and then the next time you check for updates, or the next time Windows checks automatically, the whole process starts again from the beginning. This is not a report from a handful of edge case machines with unusual configurations. The threads collecting these experiences span Reddit, Neowin forums, the Bleeping Computer community, and Microsoft's own feedback channels. And the volume of reports has been growing steadily since the update began rolling out. What is important to understand about the rollback behavior is that Windows is failing and recovering rather than failing and locking up. Most people in this situation are not completely locked out of their system. What they are left with is a machine that has spent hours failing to install a mandatory security patch, is still exposed to every vulnerability that patch was supposed to fix, and will keep retrying automatically in the background until either the user manually intervenes or Microsoft quietly pushes a fix on their end. Microsoft has now confirmed in their own documentation one specific cause of these failures. The error code in question is 0x800F9222, and it is triggered on devices where the EFI system partition does not have enough free space. The EFI system partition is a small, dedicated section of your drive that handles the boot process. It is not something most Windows users ever think about, have any reason to look at, or know the size of. During this particular update, Windows tries to write new secure boot certificate files to that partition as part of the reboot phase. If the partition has 10 megabytes or less of free space, the write fails, the installation rolls back, and that error code appears. Most of the people hitting this issue have no idea their EFI partition exists, let alone that it was running low on space. And Microsoft's recommended fix involves backing up your registry and manually editing partition tables, which is the kind of step that can easily make a bad situation significantly worse if anything goes wrong in the middle of it. Their own documentation includes a specific warning that editing the registry incorrectly can cause serious system issues. That is the official language for proceed with extreme caution, which is not the phrase you want to encounter when all you were trying to do was let Windows update normally. Now here's what you should do right now before Windows installs anything. The first and most important step is to pause automatic updates immediately. You can do this by going to Settings, then Windows Update, and looking for the Pause Updates option. Set it to pause for at least a week. This does not permanently block updates. It gives you time to check your system, back up your data, and make an informed decision rather than having Windows install something in the background while you're using your computer for something else. The second step is to back up anything on your machine that you cannot afford to lose. If this update does cause a boot failure on your hardware, you will want that backup before you start troubleshooting. An external drive, a cloud backup, even copying your most critical files to a USB drive, any of these is better than nothing. The third thing to check, if you are comfortable looking at your system, is how much free space is available on your EFI partition. This is not something you can check through normal Windows Explorer. You will need to open Disk Management, which you can find by right-clicking the Start button. Look for the partition labeled EFI System Partition. It is typically around 100 megabytes in total size on most Windows machines. If it shows less than 10 megabytes of free space, you are in the category of users most likely to hit the 0S800F0922 error. The issue affecting internet speeds is separate, and it is the one getting the least attention relative to how many people it is affecting. A subset of users on both Windows 10 and Windows 11, after installing this month's updates, are reporting that their internet connection is noticeably slower. Not slightly slower, noticeably slower on speed tests, on streaming, on file downloads, and on general browsing. The connection appears normal. The hardware has not changed. The router has not changed. The internet service plan has not changed, but throughput is down measurably after the update. The cause appears to be related to changes in how Windows handles network driver interactions and packet processing at a low level. This is not something the average user can diagnose easily from the surface, and Microsoft has not issued any official acknowledgement of it. Well, what the community has identified is that in some cases, rolling back the specific network-related components of the update, or temporarily uninstalling the KB package entirely and waiting for a revised version, resolves the speed issue. But that is not a simple process, and it carries its own risks if not done carefully. If your machine has already installed this update and you're now dealing with the aftermath, here is how to approach recovery depending on what you're seeing. If Windows is stuck in the install loop, failing and rolling back repeatedly, the first thing to try is running the Windows Update Troubleshooter. You can find it by going to Settings, then System, then Troubleshoot, then Other Troubleshooters, and selecting Windows Update. This will attempt to identify and automatically fix the most common causes of update failure. It will not solve the EFI space issue, but it resolves a significant number of other causes. If the troubleshooter does not help and you are seeing the 0S800F922 error code specifically, Microsoft's guidance is to check your EFI partition space. The safest approach at this point is to search for the KB article associated with your specific error code on Microsoft's support site and follow the documented steps exactly. Do not improvise on partition table edits. If you are not comfortable doing this yourself, and there is no shame in that because it is genuinely technical, this is a situation where paying for 1 hour of professional support is significantly cheaper than recovering from a broken boot environment. If your machine is not booting at all after the update attempted to install, Windows should have automatically triggered the recovery environment. When you power on and see the recovery screen, the first option to try is Startup Repair, which Windows runs automatically. If that does not resolve it, you can try System Restore, selecting a restore point from before the update date, which will roll your system configuration back to its previous working state without affecting your personal files. If neither of those options is available or neither works, you will need a bootable Windows installation media. Microsoft offers a tool called the Media Creation Tool on their official website that allows you to create a bootable USB drive with a Windows installer. From that environment, you can access additional recovery options, including the ability to boot from the previous version of Windows that was in place before the failed update. There's also the BitLocker angle, and this is one that catches people completely off guard. During the process of installing and failing to install this update, some users are reporting that their machine is booting into a BitLocker recovery screen and asking for a 48-digit recovery key. BitLocker is a full disk encryption feature that Windows uses to protect your drive. It is enabled by default on many modern Windows machines, and a lot of people have no idea it is running because Windows manages it quietly in the background. When a boot level change is detected, which a failed Windows update absolutely counts as, BitLocker can trigger a recovery check to make sure the system has not been tampered with. If you do not have your BitLocker recovery key, you are locked out of your own data until you locate it. The recovery key is tied to your Microsoft account. If you sign into Windows with a Microsoft account, which most people do, you can find your recovery key by going to account.microsoft.com. On another device, signing in and looking under Devices, and then BitLocker recovery keys. If you have the key, entering it at that screen will get you back in immediately. If you do not have the key and cannot locate it through your Microsoft account, the data on that drive is not accessible through normal means. This is why backing up before updates is not optional advice. It is the thing that separates an inconvenience from a disaster. Something worth understanding about the broader pattern here, beyond this specific update, is what it tells you about how to manage Windows updates going forward. Microsoft releases security patches on a fixed monthly schedule because the vulnerabilities they are patching are real, and the threats exploiting them are real. Delaying updates indefinitely is not a safe strategy, but blindly accepting updates the moment they become available, without a brief pause to see if large-scale problems emerge in the wider user base, is also not the right approach. The sweet spot for most home users is a pause of 7 to 14 days after each major Patch Tuesday release. During that window, the community identifies problems. Microsoft typically issues follow-up patches for the worst issues, and you can install with considerably more confidence. Enterprise environments handle this systematically through staged rollout policies. Home users can replicate the same logic simply by setting a pause on the day of release and removing that pause 10 days later. The specific things to check right now, if you are on Windows 10 or Windows 11, are these. Confirm whether KB50895549, KB50874420, or KB50875544 are already installed by going to Settings, mark Windows Update, and then Update History. If they show as installed, check your internet speed with a speed test and compare it to your expected performance. If you're seeing a meaningful drop, note the KB number, search for it along with the word slow internet in your browser, and check whether the community has identified a specific fix for your hardware or network configuration. If those updates are not yet installed, pause your updates now. Back up your data and check back in roughly 10 days. Microsoft typically issues cumulative fixes within 2 weeks of a problematic release when the volume of reports reaches the level we are currently seeing. Check your Microsoft account for your BitLocker recovery key regardless of whether you think you have BitLocker enabled. The number of people who discover mid-recovery that they did not know where their key was is significant, and finding it now takes 2 minutes. The security vulnerabilities in this release are real. The DNS client flaw, the remote code execution risks, the critical patches for 17 high-severity issues, these are not theoretical. They are the kind of vulnerabilities that get actively exploited once they are publicly known, which they now are. Delaying too long increases your exposure in a real, meaningful way. The goal is not to avoid the update. The goal is to install it on your terms, with your data backed up, with your recovery key in hand, and with the confidence that the specific problems being reported have either been addressed in a follow-up patch or do not apply to your hardware. That is not a complicated process. It is a 10-minute checklist that sits between you and a potentially hours-long recovery situation. Take the 10 minutes.